I'm your host, Jens Johansson. Glad to see you here to learn more about your buildings. If you're joining us on the podcast today, thanks for listening. If you'd like to watch the show for the full experience, visit our website, j2consultants.com, to register for the Building Doctor Show and attend live via Zoom and submit your questions to be answered live. I'm happy to announce that we're live streaming today on YouTube for the first time, so that's probably a little bit of these technical difficulties we're getting into. So thanks for your patience as we work through this. So everybody on YouTube, feel free to leave your questions and comments in the live chat there. Today, we're talking about coastal community care and some tips on maintaining coastal properties and those near the water. So backed by popular demand, we're excited to have James Jenkins with us today, one of our senior project managers and coastal property expert at J2 Building Consultants on the show today. So James brings a wealth of skills to the table, spanning all facets of the building industry, from hands-on trade work and project management to construction management and defect analysis. So James oversees several of our coastal projects, and he's going to be sharing his experience and some tips on protecting your buildings against coastal issues. Welcome, James. Do you have any intro for the group?
No, just happy to be here. Yeah, love the show, love being a part of it, and thanks for having me again. It's fun, and looking forward to talking about the coast.
Awesome. Okay, and of course you'll have the chance to ask your questions of James and myself free of charge. So stick around for the live Q&A at the end, and we'll answer as many as we can. Brooke and Carolyn, the producers, will be monitoring the chat, and James and I will go through the Q&A panel at the end of the show. So the chat's good for questions. Brooke and Carolyn will answer those things, but get your Q&A questions in the Q&A tab. So another benefit of attending live is that we will be doing a massive raffle giveaway. We've got a summertime beach bucket full of all sorts of goodies in there, even some Kool-Aid Otter Pop things. So stay tuned for that. And we'll get this show on the road. So today we're talking about coastal projects, but that also includes those near the coast and those over the water. Maybe they're freshwater lakes with piers, project buildings on piers, etc. So we're going to be covering additional high wind concerns, corrosion, salt sprays, sand, tides, temperature swings, things like that. We're going to talk about a little bit of additional testing we use for steel, like ultrasonic testing. In previous shows, we've talked about drill probe testing, where we drill into wooden piers and columns, and a few other things to consider on the coast. You know, they're typically smaller towns, so you have a smaller contractor pool. Sometimes they're higher end properties or vacation properties, so people don't use them as much. And there's some additional setbacks, of course, protecting the sea wildlife. So here we go. We're looking at, this isn't a coastal one. This is one of these freshwater buildings here. It's out over the lake. And here's what your crawl space looks like that's under the building. And so working on these buildings, especially on these outbound edges, we've got some additional safety concerns with contractors hanging over the building on swing stages and things like that. And we've got some, EPA, guidelines to follow, so we don't drop debris and things like that into the water. And there's just some additional things to think about. There's pilings that need to be investigated. These are concrete piles. We've seen wooden piles. Think of a wharf or a waterfront. Some of these waterfront wharfs that used to be shipping things, and now maybe they've kind of gentrified a little bit, and they've got some cool bars in them or breweries and things like that, but they're built on that original wharf document. So here's some photos of us getting some steel piling casings installed and craned in. It's kind of a different environment that we're working on. Again, here we're over the water. We've got scaffolding that can't go into the water. It's actually lagged out from the building. We're trying to catch all the debris, lots of safety equipment. If people are working out over there, they're wearing life jackets. It's just a different kind of environment. And for us inspectors, sometimes we got to get in our kayaks here. Here's
Okay.
even inspecting the underside of a building.
Gosh darn it. That's what happens when you, there you go.
Makes our job a little bit harder.
I'm J2's professional engineer, and I just never know what I'll do every day when I go in to work. Sometimes I'm at the desk doing calculations. Sometimes I am using computer programs to analyze buildings. Today, I am underneath a building over water looking at concrete beams. Never know where you're going to go with J2.
In this, what's fun to watch in this is our access, the ability to get under these buildings. And let me go back to, you can see some of the under building insulation. So here's our steel pan deck. We've got concrete on top of that, making that first floor. But to give it a warmer floor, exterior insulation has been mounted, and wind, and I believe some water action has torn down some of this insulation. So we're under here checking that out. So building on a foundation. What do you want to talk about here, James?
Yeah, I mean, certainly you got to think about the substrate and what are we dealing with out on the coast. Primarily sand, right? So compaction is certainly going to be something to be thinking about. Erosion, right? Erosion and sediment control. So, you know, as we build these things in the 60s, I mean, things move, things shift. Fingers crossed, we haven't seen a seismic event too measurable, you know, yet, but we do know something's coming. So those are all things to think about, certainly when we're out there in that coastal application. So yeah.
Yeah. See a lot of sand. So your foundation can move like the sands of time, right? So you typically have higher water tables because we are at sea level. And so usually the water tables are working their way down towards the sea, but we've got water and sand and mud and things like that to deal with. So then the next thing we have is high winds. And so we're going to talk a little bit about roofing and cladding and windows and wind-driven rain. But this is an interesting wind scale. Does the building code use this, James?
I'm not too familiar with the Beaufort wind scale. Primarily, ASCE 7 is American Society of Civil Engineers. Basically, that's our load table. So based on, you know, your geographical location, right, we have different wind ratings. A lot of times out on the coast, we're talking about special wind regions. So the jurisdiction's going to say, you know, this is a special wind region. And I know primarily in Oregon, the entire coast is a special wind region. So we have printouts that basically tell us what designs, wind speeds we need to design for.
Right. And so when you're listening to the weather report, you'll hear gale warnings on the marine weather forecast, or you'll hear, you know, gale warnings, high wind warnings, things like that. And this transfers us into, you know, some wind speed, 40 to 50 mile an hour, and then wave height. I think that's out in the middle of the ocean, but that wave is still crashing into the shore. And so talking about waves, here we're looking at a building that's out on the waterfront, and this is the sand. I'm down here on the beach, and they had kind of their first, it was kind of a wall, I guess you'd call it. It was their foundation floor, not floor height, but garage height. And so you can see in the back of the building, they had kind of this boat storage area, and they had a boat storeroom, but they just had an open chain link fence. And I'm at low tide, obviously, standing on the beach, but normal tide is really only a foot or 18 inches below this wall level, basically. And then they'd get water that at higher tide or wind conditions that would flood into these boat carport kind of things and just cause a heck of a lot of damage. And so here's another photo of that. That first photo, I'm out in this corner measuring this platform deck, if you will. But what this this association tried to do is tried to put some ecology blocks along the edge just to kind of buffer, not necessarily be watertight, but buffer some of the wave action. And you can see after a pretty significant storm, we get just a lot of gravel and sand. So there's a lot of water crashing over this to move these ecology blocks. And these blocks weren't going all the way around to kind of give them a little bit more bulkhead, if you will. So we ended up pouring in a higher concrete wall and helping them with that. But wave and surf damage is really something to think about. We've heard about king tides. Those are the highest tides you get in a year. And so there's high tide mark and there's king tide mark. So even if there's no wind or wave action, it's just, it's just full and right at the edge there. Next, we're dealing with windows. And so any window that's part of AMA, the window manufacturer program, you'll get a window rating. These are called gold stickers, and they're stuck usually up inside the window area. So go to your windows and check. But this is a PG-15. R stands for residential. And this is the lowest possible grade window you can buy. It's typically sold just on the shelf at the big box stores. But they're really, for window testing and wind testing purposes, they're really only rated for about 27 miles per hour of wind speed. And after that, they start leaking. So that rating level saying, I'm rated for 27 and under. If you're getting more than 27 mile an hour winds at the coast or on near bodies of water, obviously your windows are going to be leaking if these aren't a higher rating. So we kind of expect to see PG, or the newer designation called DP, PG 35 to 45 on coast areas that can withstand wind speeds and water penetration, 45 to 55 mile an hour winds.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's the AMA Gold sticker. They have been in window frames since I was a kid in the 80s, peeling off of my mom's house. I remember that. But those are critical identification for us to come and tell how your window is rated to perform, right? So yeah, they're rated for structural, they're rated for air infiltration, they're rated for water infiltration. So the engineering side, right, we're doing the design pressure in pounds per square foot of how much wind that panel and frame can take and deflect and recover. And we know that if it can work out structurally, it's going to work out for the air infiltration and the water infiltration. So in that coastal application, you're absolutely right. We don't want to see R15 on that schedule on that sticker. We want to be in that 30 to 45 rating, and that's all based on your proximity to the shore, exposure category, and things like that. But you can pretty much guarantee if you can see the ocean, you want to see a higher number than 15 there.
Yes. So there's the DP rating is when the glass breaks out of the frame. And so we're talking about the wind and water resistant rating. And there's test methodology for that I think we've discussed in previous episodes. But yeah, you could go and look right now. If you're on the coast and you don't have a 30 plus, your window is kind of like bringing a tricycle to the racetrack. So thinking about, and if you're thinking about replacing windows or telling your residents to replace windows, make sure they replace it with a good grade necessary for the environment. Okay, more wind stuff. Roofs. Let's talk about roofs. So fully adhered versus mechanically adhered. Do you want to talk about that, James?
So a mechanically attached roof, right? As you can imagine, they're going to be anchored with fasteners spaced at a certain distance. And, we calculate those fastening patterns based on exposure category and things like that. I'm not saying that there are no mechanically attached roofs in the coast, but generally at J2, we look at requirements is kind of, that's the bare minimum, right? So what do we like to spec out? We like to spec out fully adhered roof membrane systems. And that is what it exactly sounds like. It is 100% adhered. So when you talk about all that fluttering and that, you know, it wants to uplift and wind get underneath and pull, there's positive pressures and negative pressures. We have a fully adhered system. We just give our roof assembly a much better fighting chance in that environment, right? And I think it's going to be belt and suspenders all day long today. It's what you're going to hear. And that's kind of what we need to throw at this environment when we're staring the Pacific Ocean right in the face.
Right. There's your breakers breaking right there. So mechanically attached for roll roofing, like a TPO, or in this case, a torch down style, they come in a 3 or 5 foot wide roll, and we nail or screw or, you know, mechanically attach just one edge, and then we glue it down to the next edge. And so there's room in there for air to get underneath the system and actually billow the roof membrane. It looks like air under a sheet or a parachute. When you were little kids, you'd play that game. And that pulling can actually pull inadvertently on those screw heads and rip the roof membrane, or stretch it, and then the next wind comes along, stretches it more, and ultimately rips it off. And so the fully adhered is, think of it either glued, or there's a Velcro, that I know that's a brand name, but a hook and loop style that totally bonds it down so air can't get under it. And so that's what we're talking about here. So more stuff on high winds, the cladding attachment, and exterior insulation. So these are a couple organ jobs. There's one of our guys looking at a wall system.
You know, offhand, it looks like some sort of a sheet. Basically, they've got something peeled down, and he's investigating the sheathing, I think, behind some WRB, weather resistant barrier, basically, or building paper, however you guys want to say it. A lot of acronyms in this business. But yeah, as you can imagine, I mean, that exposure, right? You are on the front line. So, you know, that elevation is taking the brute force of Mother Nature. So, you know, water's getting pushed in there, cold air is getting pushed in there, corrosion, sand. We talk about sandblasting to take paint off. Well, there's no better sandblaster than the beach and those dunes. So, yeah, I mean, $1 million views, but I mean, with that comes, you know, the work involved to maintain. Yeah.
Right. So here's some hardy bevel siding. I notice a thinner design, you know, a 4-inch or 6-inch plank versus an 8-inch wide plank that gives each board a little bit more uplift if we're less uplift if we're blind nailing, so wind can't get under there as easy. And so just thinking about what types of siding you're going to put on, et cetera. The exterior insulation is a new code element, getting more insulation into our wall cavities. Everybody's pretty familiar with filling the stud bay with fiberglass batt, but now we're talking about putting solid foam exterior insulation and then putting our cladding over the top of that. And the foam actually acts as a nice buffer, or makes the whole cladding system a little bit more robust. And so that's a nice upgrade. Okay, now we're going to talk corrosion. So salt spray, salt laden air, fog, mist, you know, kind of that morning marine layer that hovers over the bay and comes up into the shore. It can have extra salt in it. And so this affects all sorts of stuff, like structural steel, deck bolts and mounts, light fixtures, signs, electrical things, you know, just all sorts of things that have any other kind of grade of metal that will be affected by this corrosion and this extra salt. So this picture is an interesting one. That's a magnet, and we're pulling what out of it?
Just metal shavings, basically. Yeah.
So this is an old top deck mounted rail post hole that was patched over, coated over, and the railing moved a little bit, and the membrane is worn away, and we're actually able to pull old metal bolt shavings and things like that out of this hole. And then of course the metal railing itself is rusting and staining the membrane. You can see the stain all over it. In the left photo, you can see some we call red iron or structural steel. It's really getting rusted and pitted, and it's having a number done on it. But this is a lakefront property, and we've shown other pieces of. Let's see, I think I have a piece of metal here that we peeled off one of these pieces of structural steel, and just the rust is flaking off like a flake, coming off in flakes. Okay, here's some steel metal pan deck. Remember, we were under the building and we looked up and we saw that nice metal looking pan deck. It looked like this area, but this this is some metal pan deck that was exposed somewhere and is getting just really rusted out. Then we get into some other kinds of siding. This is an interesting, we have a project that had the rusted look, we call it. So it's that architectural metal look that's designed to kind of turn a patina, get a little rusty. And the thinking behind it is that a surface layer of rust develops, and then the rust itself stops. And so, but when you add that salt, it just keeps going and keeps going. And so it doesn't stop. And you get, here's more of that, you get these pitting holes. You can actually see some of the metal siding rusting through, and we've got some holes in it. You know, it came out to the site looking like this. It was designed to kind of have an orange tint to it, but it definitely is not designed to pit and flake and chunk out and rust through. And so we'll get to some of these. We'll talk about this and manufacturer's warranties a little bit later. But this deeper pitting, the rust look, yeah, I think the jury's still out on that as far as if it's cool. I get it, but the rust needs to stop. Otherwise, it's just unprotected steel that degrades.
I think the architectural term is beach funk. I've heard that. I don't know. I kind of like it.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. All right. So corrosion here. This is a brick tie. And so we've got a brick building in the background. The brick ties, think of them like L's behind the brick. And so the vertical we screw into the wall, and the horizontal we embed in the mortar between each brick layer. And that kind of keeps the brick cladding from peeling off the building. And so these brick ties are pretty important. And this one we're bending and breaking in half with our fingers after about 40 years. And so let's see, there's supposed to be a video here. There we go. Now this is structural steel. And so this is like these pieces. You know, we're just taking a screwdriver to the bottom of the flange, and
so that's the steel connector.
So needless to say, we don't want it to do that.
Note that structure is completely shored. There's a giant yellow post that's supporting it. So we wouldn't normally be doing that as aggressive. There you go. He shows it. Disclaimer.
Yeah. Yeah. Disclaimer. Yeah, we've got a shoring beam and posts in place just to keep that held up because we saw some of that deterioration there. So door locks. Hey, I'm showing up in my Airbnb. I don't even want to touch that thing to enter the code that the person gave me. So, and isn't this brass, James, or is this just a cheap coated something?
It's hard. I mean, you could tell it's one of those off the shelf, cool key code things, but that's the thing. Even if the surface is maybe a corrosion resistant, it's what's on the inside, the lock set, the guts of the deadbolt. all of that metal is vulnerable, right, to that environment. So yeah, that was a pretty extreme case.
Yeah. I don't even want to touch that. Yeah. And so that's starting to affect the door paint as it kind of works under the finish of the door. And it's just really, here's the door jamb, the deadbolt's rusting out. So this, we're going to talk about maintenance in a little bit. Here's some of your electrical outlets, and that's the outside. So the inside, of course, has some screws and some metal prongs, and you plug things into it, and you hope that the corrosion hasn't destroyed the metal tangs and things like that that transfer the electricity. And so you can see the screw heads are just wasted. Now these things are, this lock set's 3 feet above the ground. And so this outlet, I don't know where that is on the building, but these aren't submerged. This is just surface level corrosion. So then we get into sliders and things like that. Now these are aluminum sliders, but you can see the rust and staining coming onto the deck membrane. They may be aluminum sliders, but sometimes they have steel wheels or steel rivets holding the aluminum together, or who knows what the screen is. The screen may be a steel mesh. So there's always kind of some different components mixed into things. And we'll talk about sliders and windows here in a little bit. But here we're up on a roof and we've got some stainless steel, but we've got apparently some steel rivets holding the stainless steel together. So that's, again, causing a mess, starting to fail at the attachment that these things are tied into. Actually, what is this? Do you know, James?
Yeah, it's like a chimney, basically cap, so custom fabricated, beautiful type 316 stainless, which we'll get into the different types of stainless steel. But you hit it, when you start using, your welding material or your soldering material, your rivets and things like that that aren't the same rating, you're going to see that kind of corrosion happening. So, just kind of, you're never free from it, right? You can only put your best foot forward, so to speak.
So here's our roofing membrane. This is a TPO or PVC type membrane, and you can see the screed, it's called. And so the screed, in most roofing applications, they lay down a base coat of the membrane, they put a screen or screed in it, and then they put a top coat of membrane on it and make kind of a sandwich, and that screed holds everything together. Well, the top coating deteriorates over time in the sun, and when it wears down so that you can start seeing the screed, your roofing membrane is getting worn out as well. And the screed is not watertight. It's actually capillary action. So water is starting to get into this roof membrane. And undoubtedly, because of all the sand blowing and basically sandblasting the surface and the hot beach sun, etc. So a couple things to look for there. Here's your typical deck rail, just knackered. The stiles are rusting out, spalling, corroding, dripping on the deck, and this is likely a steel rail. Here's some interesting ones. Here's a door jamb, and so we've got some kind of front door or something here, threshold, steel door jamb, and the steel corrosion off the side or the edge of the steel door. And so we're getting lots of transfer there. Again, aluminum windows. Now, are these holes, James? There's another close-up.
Yeah, that is, basically pitted all the way through the frames.
And that's aluminum that's supposed to resist salt better. I mean, we make fishing boats out of aluminum. So this is some of the most extreme that I've seen. Here's a good close-up of another one. Well, here's what's left of your window frame. So this would be over here on this window. This one, it doesn't look as bad, but yeah, there's nothing there. Okay, here's why. So this this white buildup is not Studio 54 or cocaine. It's actually salt. And so this is salt buildup on the sliding glass door track. And it looks like snow. And so the wheels on the bottom of the slider, again, they're plastic or steel, or they've got little gears and ball bearings in them. Those are toasted. The frames are getting toasted. Was this a first floor window or where was it?
Yeah, this is like a 5-story building right on the coast. So yeah, these are about 10 foot tall, huge storefront, big heavy sliders. Yeah, yeah. So maintenance, maintenance, maintenance.
Maintenance. We're going to start talking about regular maintenance and even getting crazy on maintenance. Beam buckets, we call them buckets. They're this bracket that the beam sits in, but you can see the steel column post. They've tried to paint it. They've tried to, wire brush it and give it a coat of paint, but you can do that for a little while. But once the water gets into that steel, it just spalls and keeps peeling off. So your bracket, I think the bracket right here is even busted all the way through. Is that?
Yeah, the weld is totally shot, and basically that that rusted square looks like a washer now. It's no longer a bucket, so any lateral side to side
Yeah.
could knock that whole beam just right off the top of that post.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know.
Okay. So yeah, things you can visually see when you're walking around your building. So make notes of that stuff. Okay, here's peeling off some more steel flanges, like those little chunks I showed you. This is a shelf angle that's designed to support brick veneer. And so you can see the weeps along these weep holes in the bottom angle that designed to drain the water out from behind the brick. But it was so corroded that we could just peel it off like shale. So there's nothing holding up the brick anymore. So that was a little exciting. Here's some close-ups of that. All right, now we're gonna come back to stainless steel a little bit. So why is my stainless turning brown? So James, tell us about tea staining.
Yeah, yeah. So if you can imagine, a tea filter, like it turns that kind of brown color. Tea staining is a term, and it's basically a form of corrosion, but really, it just goes to show that the maintenance factor never goes away, right? So this hood is a custom made hood. It's got nice slope to it to shed bulk water off. It is made with the premium type 316 stainless steel that we like to see, but without any maintenance, right? Wiping down that salt periodically, a couple times a year, you're going to start seeing that tea staining. And what that's eventually going to become is, it's going to get worse and worse and worse over time. So when people, stainless steel is very expensive, but it does not bypass the need for that maintenance, right? And my analogy is, if you've ever seen the deck crew working on those super yachts, they're constantly wiping down the stainless steel so it looks pristine and polished. But if they were to stop, you would start seeing the tea staining, and then that would translate into something worse if left unchecked.
Right. What are they wiping it down with? Are they waxing it? Are they polishing it? Are they just soap and watering it? What?
Yeah, I think just, honestly, I have gone up and just licked my thumb and rubbed and I can remove it just with a spit shine, so to speak. Different products work. I've actually seen some maintenance crews use like a polish, like Brasso almost, on trench drains in nice pool rooms. They pull the grates off and just kind of give them a little polish. But really, ultimately, you can flip those trench drains over that are stainless and see that salt buildup. So really, water, rag, get that salt off. It's just a wipe down with water, basically,
Right.
Would suffice.
So what's the right photo? The right photo is a steel bracket.
Yep.
Looks like it's under a parapet cap flashing.
Yeah, so that's just basically, hey, we have this nice stainless steel cap flashing, but somebody just took a zinc plated L bracket, you know what I mean, and just kind of to secure something, and it is just corroded,
Right.
you know, and leaking and bleeding all over the place.
Right. Wow. Okay, now back to structural steel. We've got some kind of electrical. This is what we're showing here is a walkway, but with electrical conduit. So we can kind of see the wires over there, yellow, kind of whitish yellow and red. They go into a metal, it's all brown and black, but it's totally disintegrated. So this is aluminum electrical conduit that is disintegrated away. Now the wires are exposed. And so we've got some safety issues there. And then we go to the next slide. This kind of that same, I believe it's the same walkway. Here's some steel embeds on the edge holding up our walkways, but you can see the spalling has gotten to the edge of the steel, and then it's causing, expanding and causing the concrete to break away. Here's some of our electrical going up to an electrical post, and you can, you just gotta do that visual review and that walk around just to make sure things are looking good.
You know, steel exposed like that expands, it's kind of causes what we call rust jacking, right? So the expansion of that steel inside of concrete's very rigid, it's very brittle. So when something expands, it's as strong as steel, it's going to pop and blow through, and you're going to start seeing things. So certainly we'd want to, at the very least, do like superficial treatment, try to chip away any of that loose rust or anything like that, and then treat it with a zinc-rich primer, something to give it a fighting chance to buy time for a comprehensive repair. But
get some topical coating over the concrete to make it waterproof instead of just a wet blob of concrete sitting on steel. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, then let's go back to that coating. We hear the argument that it's an outside sidewalk. Who cares if the water drains through? There's no living space underneath. And it's like, well, you got steel inside your concrete. And so let's protect that rebar. Let's protect any kind of edge metal. Let's protect any kind of post-tension cables and things like that to keep water out of the concrete, which then gets into your steel. And here's what happens. And so, of course, it doesn't happen as fast as wood, but it definitely is a thing. So nice looking stainless steel flashings here. What can you tell us?
Yeah. So this is a big roof project, and then a new anchored brick veneer system on the left. So we basically demoed all the old brick, and those shelf angles you were talking about. We came back with new structural shelf angles that are made out of the nice 316 stainless steel, and then that parapet top cap metal on the left. That's all, yep, custom fabricated stainless steel to give us a best fighting chance against that corrosion. Same thing on the right side. You're just seeing some of that coping metal coming down, drip edge flashing. There's a lot of metal there. And so, beautiful fabrication job, if I might say.
Yeah, that's really
Yeah.
nice. You can see the breakers. You can see that morning marine layer that is potentially full of salt-laden air and just always wet, constantly wetting things down. All right, recommendations on windows. You saw the aluminum windows just full of pitted holes. Vinyl's nice, but fiberglass is even better. So the other thing we make boats out of is fiberglass. So the new style of fiberglass windows and doors with some corrosion resistant hardware, latches, door lock sets, hinges. Think through that stuff. And then just maintenance tips, never stop wiping down and washing, and we'll get into a little bit of that. Sand. Beaches and sand is another thing. It gets into everything. And you can see the sand here. We're on a second level. We're 10 feet up. And you can see the sand on the brick. You can see the sand on the doors. We're wiping off. This is what, an edge of a stair.
Yep. Yeah, that's a stringer, a C-channel steel stringer. So this is a breezeway between buildings. So really, it's kind of the side elevation, and yeah, this is just a wind tunnel, literally from the ocean all the way through. So that sand just comes through, and
Sticks to everything. It's nice and wet, and it just
yeah,
sticks on there. You can see it on the bottom edge of the railings. You can, it's just, man, oh man. So it's not so much just sand coating, but it's all the fine sand gets into all your hinges, your lock sets again, your hardware, anything that moves gets a bunch of sand in it, real fine stuff. So, okay, birds, another thing to worry about. We're up on roofs. Birds like they pick up some seashells and bring it over to the roof, and I'm safe up here from ground predators. So we'll see just all sorts of seashells, crab, clams, and this picture happens to happens to be a rabbit's foot. I mean, just anything the birds grab, they bring up to the roof and munch on and eat. And so and then they of course poop all over everything, and then they nest. And so then once you have nesting birds, now you have to, you want to be nice to them and not scare away the babies, but they start plugging up vents and ductwork and things like that. So it's something to start planning for a little bit. And so, the real common ones are the spikes, kind of the spiking things to keep them from nesting on. This would be just a masonry angle, but if you have a big problem, you could put bird spikes on this area. That's probably another reason that it's sloped. It's sloped for drainage, but we might even put an extra crown in it to make it a little less comfortable for them to sit on. They also have some wire systems. They deliver a low enough voltage kind of irritant. And another thing I've heard is they don't like to swing their wings when there's these little wires around, and so it just makes it uncomfortable for a place to land. There's another product that has a sound, so you can program it. Here's the predator of pigeons. Here's the predator of seagulls. And so you can program the dial to play a sound, basically a wave file of their predator, and that just kind of keeps them away and doesn't physically irritate them like spikes and wires. So something to plan for, something to, get up on your roof and make sure you don't have a bunch of sharp seagull or sharp shells up there that need to be cleaned up. So back to tide or back to steel damage. Again, we're not on the beach, we're way above it, but we get some high tides that kind of come over that first beach rise, and then they're kind of trapped in there, and they flood out the unit, flood your garages, flood your site, and it's hard to get the water out, because I'm talking about the areas that kind of have a little bit of a beach, maybe a little bit of beach rough, scrub brush, and then it drops back down to the building site where the buildings are. So if any water can get over that hump in a big storm, then it's kind of trapped on the other side of that berm. And here we are, the elevator pits are flooded, the garages are flooded, all the irrigation and below grade, things are flooded. Here's a sump pump that's working overtime or burned out or something, but all the stuff just gets loaded up and gets a whole bunch of sand in it. So now the sump pumps don't work, and it's just all sorts of things to think about there. More sump pumps with there shouldn't be dangling wires and overflowing valve caps and things like that underwater. So this sump pump isn't working. Anything to add to sumps and kind of just flood zones?
Yeah, absolutely. The tide, right? Like you said, you talked about king tides. So how many of these, beachfront properties have a pool room or things like that? It's like, when not to dewater your pool, right? We've heard horror stories. I haven't witnessed it myself, but people have dewatered their pool and come in the next day, and the entire thing was popped up out of the opening, ajar. Elevator, yeah,
Pool pops out. Yeah.
yeah, you have that high tide and that buoyant force just whoop, you know, so elevator pits too. So there's a lot of hydraulic fluid, mechanical equipment that we don't want to get wet and leach into the environment. So yeah, we're certainly thinking about the tides, thinking about negative side waterproofing, and keeping that water out. But like you said, a sump pump versus Mother Nature, good luck, you know. So that picture was a backup sump pump that you know, the secondary wasn't working, so we were really, you know,
The backup to the backup.
yeah.
Got it. All right, now wind and wind-driven rain. So we talk about this a lot on our episodes, but yeah, you just get pounded. And again, whether it's marine layer, whether it's wind and surf and salt spray and water wave action, it just pounds itself right into these, in these instances, these wood frame homes. Here's a rim joist. It looks like a 2x4 rim, and underneath that is some sheathing, and it's all just all sorts of magical colors from the organic growth and salt and protein and all sorts of things happening in there. That is just a muddy, murky mess, and not much left of your. This is your gypsum sheathing. This is supposed to be white, like the drywall sheetrock you have on the interior of your building. So it's, yeah, it's hard to describe even what's happening there, but it's just so far gone. It's reverting to topsoil. And then the framing underneath it, you know, if you can take a little poker and just chip away at your framing, that's not in good shape. Here's your siding. That's obviously been tattered. And then, you know, big corner columns. Here's building across the street from the water. Here's what your corner columns look like. They're just punky and not much there to hold things up. So when you can push your screwdriver, not just the point, but all the way through the handle into the wood, there's not a lot there. So additional coastal wind-driven rain, storm, water damage. Okay, then temperature swings is a big deal too. You know, one day it's sunny on the beach, and the next day we've got an icy wind blowing off the water. What do they call that on the East Coast? Nor'easter. You know, if it blows a different direction, it brings cold temperatures. And so I think this is one of your projects, James. When were these icicles happening?
So this is near Astoria, kind of northern coast in Oregon. And if you recall, I think 3 years ago we set a record where it was 116 degrees in Portland, right? So in Gerhardt, it reached 100 degrees, right? Unbelievable. No one has air conditioning. Miserable, miserable day. This was in the wintertime. We had an ice storm recently. So we've hit 100. And now this is about 17 degrees with wind. I mean, this was a miserable, miserable day. So the leaking that's coming from behind that sheathing actually was freezing and formed icicles. So I thought that was a great picture, just to emphasize those temperature swings. So, you know, you talk about expansion and contraction. When you hit 100 and you hit, you know, icicle wind, you can imagine, you know, the materials you want to select, right? So you talk about vinyl versus fiberglass, expansion, contraction, yada, yada, yada. But yeah, it was an interesting one.
Looks like an episode of Deadliest Catch where the salt spray is freezing on the boat. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. All right. Got sand, salt, and seagulls. Call James. He's excited to talk to you about some solutions for your coastal building. You can reach him at jamesj@j2consultants.com or use that little QR link and scan him. All right, some alternate testing. Tell us about this steel column and what we're doing there with the little diodes and electrical gadgets.
Yeah, so what is happening in these pictures is called ultrasonic testing. And basically what we were concerned with on this project was the primary support of these triple stack DACs, right, 3 stories high, was with these 4x4 steel columns. And we didn't really have good design. We verified that they were 4x4 by 1/4 inch thick steel, but we wanted to see, based on the corrosion, you know, was the cross-sectional area of that structural member deteriorated, and could we measure that? And
So
so the thought,
instead of 1/4 inch thick like it's supposed to be, has it whittled down to 1/8 inch or even holes in it? You can see the holes on the left side.
yep, yep. So they have a device that they can basically send an electrical signal through, and they can kind of measure the depth of that corrosion. We 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 do actually have to do a little grinding on it to try to like unearth bare, clean, bright
Right.
steel.
So
And
here
then
we're
he yeah,
grinding off
and
the paint, couple layers of paint, get
yep.
to rusty pitted stuff. If you've ever done any body work on cars, you'll know what we're doing here. But you get down to shiny metal, but then
Hmm.
you see pitting, and then over here it looks like holes.
Yeah. So when you see that corrosion continue all the way through into the member, we stop and we say, "Hey, let's get some shoring posts under there." But what we were attempting to do, ultimately, how easy is it to come in and say, "Rip it out, replace it"? We can do a little bit of testing on the front end and say, "You know what? This thing's whittled down to 1/8 of an inch. We can model it at 1/8 of an inch and see if it calcs out. If it does, we're going to save that steel." But so spend a little money on the front end, do a little analysis. Maybe we can save, maybe we can't. In this
Mhm.
instance, we started plowing through the whole entire member, so we stopped pretty quick. But we did verify that on the east elevation, we were able to salvage those posts
Mhm.
and do a little targeted repairs as opposed to the complete overhaul we had to go forward with on the west elevation.
Right.
Um,
And
yeah.
that's one of the things we also did underwater on these piling jobs where they had steel piles. And so we worked with divers to go down and they'd scrape the pile and try to get down to bare metal. And then they'd do that ultrasonic testing. And we found that we had 20% of the piling left. And so they have rehabilitation strategies of either lining the pile or putting it in the bag and filling in concrete and different things. But we can do this testing underwater as well. But basically, let's see what's under this paint. And in this case, the steel is probably rusting from the inside out. You just get those humid conditions and it just goes. It's like a cancer in the steel. But you see the pouring down rain, you see the surf not too far away, and this is what we're talking about today. So, some considerations for working on the coast. So we've talked about the damages we see, but you also have to think about construction setbacks. And so for existing buildings, you're typically grandfathered in. But if you try to change that building too much, the local building authority may kind of say you can't add on to that, or you can't remodel it. Or if it burns down to the ground, we're not going to let you rebuild it. And so there's some things you have to think about for setbacks, meaning protecting the wildlife, but also, maybe it wasn't such a great idea to build out over the water like we thought in the 60s or something, that kind of stuff. So it's a way for the building code to start kind of changing their mind a little bit and saying, we don't want to build there, so we're not going to let you rebuild. So that's some of the things we work with the building authority with when we're working on your building. So seismic design category, we talked a little bit about footings and being on sand or mud or, some kind of clay, or, if that liquefies and turns into problems during an earthquake. So we have additional seismic things to think about. Of course, we have the exposure. So we've got the wind. So that's affecting your cladding and your roof and just all sorts of things, and the salt and sand and all that jazz. And then temperature. We've talked some about that. But typically have a milder temperature on the coast, but not always. So, and then other things we're thinking about, just again, that buffer zone. Um, the need for seawalls or repairing those seawalls and redoing them, reducing damage to beachfront property during high wave events. So what kind of things can we design into your repair process? Of course, everybody's concerned about views and access. the building lots along the waterfront typically run into the water. And so you'll have a 200-foot lot, and 120 of it is sand and beach, and 80 of it's water. So harvesting your own, seashells and things like that, it's your property. But what do we get on beaches? We get front walkway promenades. We get the beach's public space. We get, kind of that conflict of private property versus shorefront or, city center. It's beautiful. We want to play on the beach. Can't we just build sand castles with the J2 bucket giveaway that we're going to do? But you get kind of this friction between property owners. Hey, get off my land. Or beachfront, hey, this is public property. It's a beach. I want to use it. So these are things we're helping you work through as we're doing this. And just the privacy, again, that privacy or that personal enjoyment of, I want to sit out on my deck and not be on a walking path. Other things we're thinking about, we talked a little bit about contractor pool. Oftentimes some of these beach areas, they started out as, hey, this was kind of my escape. This was my second home down on a little small town. And over, 50 years, every beachfront property has blossomed into, bigger and bigger communities. But there's typically a limited or a more limited contractor pool because they are far out there. They are harder to access, or they also just have, hey, Chuck, he's done all the beach work here for the last 20 years and we want to give it to Chuck. It's like, well, this is the rust and the rot and the stuff we're fixing. So I hope Chuck didn't do that. But anyway, so there's a little bit of that. There's also some insurance pieces. Some of the contractors need special insurance, or depending on what, their insurance company says, thou shalt not work on over water access buildings, or, that sometimes there's some insurance restrictions that we have to help you walk through with. So we talked a little bit about escape versus boomtown. Some of these properties we run into a lot they're my second home. It's my second thing. I don't really think about it. I'm not there to wipe things down. I'm not there to take care of it. Or it was my parents. I inherited it. I don't want to sell it. It's a wonderful thing to keep in the family, but it's not my daily, so to speak. And so I'm not there every day. And so there's a little bit of helping people understand that we need to measure this and watch it and keep an eye on it. Is there any other kind of coastal considerations you'd add, James?
Yeah, I mean, I think just accounting for the fact that we know it's going to get wet, right? So the way we designed, I mean, like you said, these things that were built in the 60s, hey, you can limp along for a long time. But just like our infrastructure as a nation, right, is kind of getting to the point where, you know what, we can only patch and paint so many times. Now we got to start thinking about doing an overhaul. And what are we going to do when we do an overhaul? We're going to think about all of the knowledge we've acquired with respects to building science, rain screen assemblies, these things to design for water to get in, but a place for it to go. Those kind of things we start thinking about giving another 50 years of life to your buildings. But, you get to a point where you can only patch and paint so long, and it's kind of time, so,
And that's some of those photos. That aluminum window didn't rust out overnight, but, it getting just hammered, or that steel column is now finally rusting through. And how old was that building with the ultrasonic testing, the steel column we talked about?
Yeah, built in the 60s, mid 60s.
So 55 years old. Yeah. I mean,
yeah. But the wood beams that are sitting in those buckets have been replaced probably 2 or 3 times over the course of that because of the exposure, right? And the fact that we aren't, they're sitting in there and they're sucking water, and it's like, cool, Chuck replaced them. But, so those are the kind of things where, you implement good weatherization details, good breathing, allow a place for that water to escape. And now you can start talking about, withstanding. Unfortunately, we don't, build things like we used to, right? The materials and everything, but, I don't know.
We're getting you on a rampage. Okay, let's talk about kind of the last coastal consideration. We hinted at it a little bit, liquefiable soils. And so when enough motion or enough well, water and flooding and things like that, turning your soil just kind of turns it into jello and turns it into a slippery kind of mess. And so we get a lot of questions about earthquakes and how do we prepare for earthquakes. And definitely this struck a bell of coastal properties. That's kind of how if you have mountains along the coast, that's the two tectonic plates colliding and making a mountain range. And so up and down the California coast, we know we have some fault lines. And so it's something to consider. And so the liquefiable soils, we don't want our soils to turn into jello and our building to move around. And actually, we have some interesting. We've been working with a PhD doctor in the University of Oregon. What's his name?
Dr. Rosh Kosherwar. He's at Portland State University.
Portland State, and his whole focus is how to prevent soil liquefaction and stabilize the soil. And he's doing it pretty neat. It's not really bug poop, but it's kind of a microbiome that we can inject into the soil, and their byproduct is actually kind of like concrete pellets, and it actually reinforces the soil. And he's having some success with bigger projects and bigger studies of we can seed the soil with microbiomes, and after a while it changes the soil density and prevents this liquefiable soil condition. So it's a natural really cool thing. So we'll have another episode on earthquakes, and maybe we can get in to talk to us about that. All right, so is any of this making sense? Salty? If you want to be salty, give me a call. So you can reach me at jensj@j2consultants.com, or you can go to this link, learn.j2consultants.com/consultant on call, and have a free 15-minute call with me. All right, we're getting into the Q&A. We had a few previously submitted questions, and so kind of that, along those lines of how do I clean my windows, decks, steel for this salt water corrosion? And we've talked about it a little bit. It's just common method for cleaning windows at the coast is to mix equal parts white vinegar and water in a spray bottle. And it can dissolve and remove salt staining after about 5 minutes. But most manufacturers say soap and water and a soft bristled brush. And so what would you add to that, James?
Yeah, I mean, with respects to cleaning a surface like a coating that's provided by a manufacturer, I would stick to the manufacturer's recommendations, right? So any project that you have had completed, you're probably going to have an O&M manual, and that's going to tell you, hey, yes, use vinegar, don't use simple green or whatever, so be very careful about solvents, about the things you pick up at Home Depot and just throw on there, and the Miracle washers. Make sure that it's recommended per your manufacturer. And then with respects to like the salt in the track, things like that, I mean, shop vac, get that stuff out of there, wipe it down. A wet rag, nothing hurts, with a wet rag.
Right.
But just make sure that you're not putting anything, solvents or any chemicals that are going to have an impact on your warranties or anything like that.
Yeah. All right, next question. Tips on maintenance. Our tips are basically double it. So if you're doing just a spring cleaning, do a spring and fall cleaning. Basically, think about it of just, I got to clean it and wipe it down twice as much as I thought. Or I have to inspect my sealants twice as often, or I've got to inspect my roof for seashells and crab parts and bird nests once a year instead of twice a year. Or, I got to check my downspouts and make sure there's no seagulls in the nesting in the collection boxes and things like that. And so it's just really, you got to get after it. You got to put that in your budget line item. It's not saying you have double the repairs, it's saying you have double the maintenance and inspection. And by doubling this cleaning, you will reduce it's just like dentistry. By increasing your cleanings, you'll reduce your cavities. And so just increase your cleaning budget. It's not that expensive. And, lots of education about it, lots of talking about it with your residents. And that will reduce your overall damage and things like that. So next question, we got a good one. So when work and materials are warranted, they usually say for 20 years or for 10 years, depending on a deck membrane or roof shingle. Is there a caveat on warranties that says under normal circumstances or not along the coastline or things like that? And can the warranties be modified to be environmental specific? So James, you reached out to a couple of manufacturers. What did they say? And I can.
Yeah. So I did. I reached out to 4 different product reps, manufacturers reps for waterproofing companies, roofing companies, so kind of an array of industries that we work with. And, there are different types of warranties, many different types of warranties. With respects to 20 years versus 10 years, both are possible, right? So there are things to discuss on the front end. There's really no distinction, and this is across the board, no distinction between geographic locations really in their warranties. So, oh, you're on the coast. Sorry, this doesn't apply to you guys. They really don't discriminate based on your geographical location. And then I guess the message that they were all kind of relaying to me is on the front end of your project, be in contact with a manufacturer. And I'm not going to ring the consultant bell of why you should be working with J2, but really in our specifications, in the submittal process, right, we are getting those sample warranty letters. We're getting those assembly letters from those manufacturers. And that's where the manufacturer can say, hey, I was involved on the front end. This is the products that are going down. We're aware of the contractor that's going to be applying it. We're going to have our tech reps on site documenting and providing those letters saying, yep, your installation's looking good. And then you're going to be presented with that pristine warranty letter at the end of the project and not, what? Why did you call us in the 8th month, the day before you're supposed to start applying it? No, get involved on the front end. And that's one of the things, that we are involved with is, bringing the contractor manufacturer together and making sure you guys can acquire those things. So I have answers. Let's see, what else do we have? Are warranties modified to be environment specific? That was the gist, the meat and potatoes of what they all kind of chimed in on and harmonized on.
They're trying to sell their product nationwide. And so they usually don't get into a bunch of different warranty provisions, non-oceanfront or oceanfront or things like that. And they usually stick by their 20 years or 10 years. Now, in that metal siding example, there is, that was Corten metal. And you can go to Corten's website and 2 pages. And on the second page, it says you should not use this in salt-laden air near the ocean, where areas of high mist or, cloud cover and things like that. It's really made for dry desert that gets a little bit of rain on it, but gets a lot of sun to just kind of bake in that rust layer and make it a protective coating, as opposed to something that's always getting wet, maybe even with salt-laden air. So in their specific package, it was like, look, the manufacturer says that. So then we'll jump over to the manufacturer's rep, again, sending them an email and saying, hey, what's going on? And they emailed back and said, yeah, you can use it, but you just won't get the number of years that, if you, it won't last you 20 years. And we specifically told you not to use it in those conditions. You can still use it, but it's probably going to last you 12 or 8 or something. But you could see that metal siding pitting and just getting full of rust holes eventually.
In the same sense, it's like they can put in special riders into a warranty letter based on specific situations. So the key is, discuss it on the front end, right? So
ask
the
up front.
contract, Yeah, the contractor consultant go, hey, we're out here on the coast. And then the manufacturer might go, you know what? Use this type of stainless steel and abrade it to this level. And
Right.
then, they put that rider in and it's kind of like, so basically, they have their generic boilerplate language, but ultimately things can be discussed, what works, what we've seen work, yada, yada, yada. So,
Yep. Okay. The next question, my association will be purchasing hundreds of thousands of dollars of work and materials, and I'd like to know specifically what the warranties will be. Are standard warranty clauses ever modified? So similar type thing. And they usually don't modify, the big corporate warranty provision. These big companies with big buildings have big groups of lawyers that write the warranty provisions. But they can, like James was saying, they can up them, or they can put in a little bit of rider situation. Hey, I understand what you're doing. You're working with a good consultant. Here's some input. We can get you 25 years instead of 20. And so that they won't modify that baseline, but they will upsell. And it's kind of part of the sales process. Maybe there's a little bit more expensive to get 5 more years or something like that. And so in these coastal environments, they're definitely worth the money. System warranties are another thing to think about. And what we mean by that is several products that go into a system. So you'll hear us talk about weather-resistant barrier systems. Well, that's your building paper, your Tyvek, and then your Tyvek tape, and then your Tyvek approved sealant, and then your, this, that, and the other thing. 5 or 6 conditions, all under one manufacturer, and they all work together. So you're getting a system warranty and maybe even a kind of an extra little insurance policy, an NDL, no dollar limit warranty, where they'll also pay for the damage, as opposed to just, here's a new window, have fun installing it. They'll pay for the water damage caused by the leaking window. So
yeah, actually, I've true story. On a coastal project, we just got done with a full re-roof, and the manufacturer provided a 20-year NDL warranty. That means on the 19th year and the 360th day, if something fails, not only will they give you the material cost, but they will pay for the labor to fix it. So we had to, on the front end of that project, have a very specific assembly letter approved by the manufacturer. We had sample warranty letters on the front end before projects kicked off. They were involved along the process, checking off punch lists, providing reports, and then we achieved that letter. And I'm very proud of that letter, but it takes work to get it. And, it's not always as easy as it's chalked up to be. So assistance is
it's just important to be aware of them up front and through the project, and at closeout, to get that binder full of those warranty checkoff letters, and not just, because, hey, let's face it, they try to get out of it if they can. And if you didn't follow step 3 out of 7 steps, you might have an issue. So that's a value to have us working on that for you. So kind of same question there. Are warranties enforceable if something is warranted for 10 years and falls apart on the coast at 6? Is the manufacturer off the hook by saying, well, it was the coast? Yeah, we kind of talked around that. Again, it depends on the warranty, how it's written, and you're looking at it up front. Some of the big reps that we talked to answering some of these questions, they said, no, 10 is 10. And unless there's some kind of coastal or salt laden air exclusion, like I talked about that metal siding. So, okay, so a little email feedback from a big supplier. We don't have exclusions. Read the other guys and see if they do. So
right.
pays to work with top shelf products. So what rating of a window is recommended for residential units half a mile from Puget Sound shoreline for wind loads expected over a typical year? I think we talked a little bit about that in the thing. We like to see, PG or DP 35s to 45s, depending if you're out on that bluff or if you're back from the bluff behind a hill, and, stuff like that. So
yeah, I mean, half mile from the sound, there's a lot of factors, so basically we have a whole, it's not as simple as that. Like, oh, I'm right here because, topography matters, right? Are you on a hill? Are you on an escarpment? the surrounding buildings, right? So there's different exposure categories ranging from B all the way to D. So, aside from just the design wind prep speeds that we need to plug that number in, there's a lot of other little factors in there. So it'd be hard to just say, oh, PG 35 in that instance, but you know, uh, we're
There's a
not
there's a
certain.
calculation. There's a series of
Yeah,
you know, height of building, exposure, all these types of things that we
yeah,
run for you. But you'll feel better if you see a 35, 40, 45, something like that on your window sticker. So
right.
just go to your windows and look for one of those stickers. And if you don't have stickers, that means your manufacturer refused to be a part of the big window manufacturer association. So that doesn't give me as much faith in their product. So anyway. Okay, next question. Is seismic stability something you look at when you do an inspection of the pillars in the water? So we're looking primarily at the pillars or the pilings, and we're seeing if they're corroded and if they're working well. Now, the earthquake and structural codes have evolved. Everything evolves with experience, and so the big highway collapse of 91 and the whatever big earthquakes of 97 changed a lot of our earthquake seismic rules. And so if your building was built before the 90s, you have an older code that didn't take seismic as seriously. And so seismic studies are, an additional, if you're concerned about it, and, it's one more service that you get to pay for, but if you're concerned about it, we'll go through that study with you. And we have done that. A lot of boards say, you know what, the building stood for this long, rated at rated at these conditions. As long as everything's performing well and in good shape, we'll take our chances. And so it's kind of you can do the study and we can help you with those upgrades, or just if we're just inspecting kind of the first level inspection, we're just looking for damage just to see if it's performing as intended. Would you add anything to that, James?
Yeah, I mean, primarily we're looking at gravity loads, right? Vertical loads, dead loads on a member. It's up to our licensed engineer's discretion to delve into the lateral weeds, so to speak. So seismic analysis and things like that. There are specific standards for seismic analysis: tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 analysis. Do we do tier 3 lateral analysis, J2? I would say no. But getting into that tier 1 level, throwing some seismic loads at cantilever column, configurations and things like that, we do. But yeah, that would be a better question probably for Stephen to answer, with respects to seismic stability, if you want to get into that.
Right. Yeah.
Yep.
We'll do an episode on earthquakes. So
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, next question was the Core 10 steel that was failing one of the beach applications? No, it was I forgot, a quarter mile off the beach. It was a ways off the beach, but you could see the bay right there, but it wasn't those big Pacific Ocean front surf spray ones. And you kind of call it protected Puget Sound, but it did not like the salt. And so that salt air, I don't know how much salt is in the air, but you can smell it when you're taking a walk down, and it just smells like beach. It smells like seawater. It smells like, and so you can feel it. You can see it on the cars, kind of the white dust, and it gets on your building. And that it's just the wrong application for that Core 10 steel to have its natural rusted look. Use that rust look over in Eastern Washington or dry high desert, and you'll get the rusted looking farmhouse or kind of winery or industrial building. That's really what it's intended for. Next question: is it better to have a diver inspect or a drone? Well, the drones are getting better and better. So you need the underwater drone, and you need a drone that can carry a little pick and kind of scrape at things. We can do some of that initial, let's just go down and take a look. And if we obviously can see big holes and things like that, that drone will tell us a lot for that initial inspection. the underwater drone. But ultimately, to have a diver go down, scrape away some of the sand and sediment around the base of the column to see if we can, base of the column or pier, see if we can see if there's a footing, see if there's some kind of already been a remediation for an overcladding of the original wood column, maybe where you can only see a steel column, but you can get your hands under there and feel there's something else. And so it's nice to have divers go down and take a peek and help you actually with the repairs. And so some of the divers that work on the piers and work on the shipyard type stuff are the same diver crews that work on the buildings and helping us restore the pilings there. Okay, any other questions? No, I don't think so. All right, good questions. And then, yeah, reminder, you can submit your questions all month long and we'll get those first in. So giveaways, James, you know the rules. The guest picks a number between 1 and 13. Whoever wins the bucket. And
Man, I gotta go. I'm excited about this. Let's go lucky 13.
Lucky 13. Okay. So you are labeled in the Zoom thing as participants, and Carolyn and or Brooke will ping you and find your information and get that out in the mail to you. And so let's see. So people who attend live qualify for the giveaways. We encourage everyone to sign up for the show. And that's one of the benefits. There's the bucket. Yeah, that's a better look at that. Don't get burned by building damage. Look at that. Sunscreen, J2 sunscreen. Okay, we have lots of free resources for boards and managers. Use the QR code or go to our website and or YouTube. Over 300 plus videos, and now we're on podcasts and YouTube Live and Zoom. So stream this webinar wherever you go. You can scan that again. This is a free show. It's educational content only. We're not giving you financial, legal, or medical advice. And so how you keep us going, how you fund our show is give us that 5-star rating that motivates us to produce more content and get it out there for people to help people. And like I said, we're live on YouTube. So get ready for that. So thanks, James, for being on the show again. Get in touch to talk to James about your Oregon buildings and about any kind of coastal buildings you'd have. James, do you have any goodbye message?
No, just don't email me tomorrow because I'm heading to the coast to do an investigation. So, yeah.
Don't lick the building salt.
No, yeah, exactly. No, thanks for having me. It's been a pleasure, guys. Always fun. Always fun.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for attending. See you next month.
Welcome to the Building Doctor Show with Jens Johansson.